Good afternoon to you. 3:06 now, News Talk 105.9 WMAL, where we're making sense of the news. Coming up this hour at 3:30, we talk to Mike Davis from the Article 3 Project about Robert Hur's testimony on Capitol Hill today. The special counsel just wrapping up that testimony moments ago on Joe Biden's memory lapses, his stolen classified documents, his lies, the attempted cover-up, and so much more. Hold on for that. Congressman Ben Cline joins us at 4:30. He is a part of the House Judiciary Committee. Got a chance to quiz Robert Hur today. Brianna Lyman is here at 5 o'clock from the Federalist. We talked to her about Adam Schiff's latest attempts to meddle in the 2024 election. And Jake Denton is set to join us at 5:30 from the Heritage Foundation as a debate about getting rid of TikTok in the United States, or at least forcing a divestiture from China, takes hold in Washington. What to make of all of it, we'll explore coming up at 5:30. You can join us at 888-630-9625, 888-630-WMAL. An hours-long hearing just wrapping up today with Robert Hur. It started at 10 o'clock this morning. That took about 5 hours now with some breaks in the middle. Let me start with some of Congressman Kelly Armstrong of North Dakota. He was the first Republican questioner to go today, and he was efficient with his time. He got right to the point on what Joe Biden did. He stole a lot of classified documents, and he kept them all over the place in the most unsafe possible locations. And then he goes over the elements of a crime. Did Joe Biden break the law?
Mr. Hur, classified documents were found at the Penn Biden Center?
That's correct.
They were found in President Biden's garage?
In Wilmington, Delaware, yes.
And in his basement den?
Also in the same home, yes.
In his main floor office?
Correct.
And his third floor den?
Correct.
At the University of Delaware?
Correct.
And
his underwear drawer?
At the Biden Institute?
Correct.
All right. And the elements of the crime for this, I mean, we get into all of this, but the elements of the crime are pretty simple, right? President Biden had unauthorized possession of a document, writing, or note. That's correct.
Correct.
And that the document, writing, or note related to national defense.
Correct.
And that the defendant, and we may talk about the willfully part here in a second, retained the document, writing, or note and failed to deliver it to an employee or officer entitled to receive it.
Correct. There is a willfulness intent element, as you say.
But those are the elements of the crime.
Including the intent element, yes.
Yeah. And there are at least two different quotes, right, where he told his ghostwriter, and this is in your report, in a matter of fact, and this is February 16, 2017, that he had just found all this classified stuff downstairs.
He did make that statement that was captured on an audio recording.
And on April 10th, 2017, Biden read aloud a classified passage related to a 2015 meeting in the Situation Room.
That is in the report, yes.
And these are national security documents. Afghanistan, has been mentioned, a whole bunch of those things, right?
Correct.
And at one point in time, his personal attorneys and the DOJ attorneys argued about notes, taking all of the different things and compared it to Reagan.
I'm sorry, could you repeat that, Congressman?
President Biden's attorneys, personal attorneys, talked about the notes and why they didn't actually account for the Presidential Records Act. But you found that argument in your report. It seems a little persuasive, but you eventually said no, the executive order trumps, right?
We did set forth an analysis of the governing law and ultimately concluded that the executive order 13526 does apply and did govern former Vice President Biden at the time.
Yeah, okay, so here's what's critical, and you heard Robert Hur kind of allude to it, the coin toss element of the crime here. So Biden violated every possible element of the law, except for one area he said it's a little dubious if we can say we got him on willful intent, that it was his intent to break the law and to disseminate this classified information. This doesn't make sense. This is the most senseless part of Robert Hur's testimony today, and it's the most maddening element of all of it. You can set aside for a moment, the Justice Department's policies about prosecuting sitting presidents of the United States. They didn't even get that far. Robert Hur, in his report, suggested that because of Joe Biden's inability to remember things and because they don't know that they could get him on guilt beyond a reasonable doubt on his willful intent to abscond with classified documents and to disseminate them, that they couldn't charge him. But that doesn't make any sense whatsoever, Because, again, there's an audio recording of Joe Biden telling his ghostwriter. I love how everybody just accepts that, by the way. The politicians don't even write their own books. That's just baked into this. I have a ghostwriter. He didn't even write his own book. Ghostwriter, he tells his ghostwriter, hey, I got all this classified information. Just found it. Let's go through it. Let's use it in the book. Let's use it in the book. And in fact, Jim Jordan explores this very detail today. Well, wait a second. There's a massive financial motive here for Joe Biden to steal classified information.
Page 231, you said this. President Biden had strong motivations. That's a key word. We're getting to motive now. President Biden had strong motivations to ignore the proper procedures for safeguarding the classified information in his notebooks. Why did he have strong motivations? Because, next word, because he decided months before leaving office to write a book. To write a book, that was his motive. He knew the rules, he broke them because he was writing a book. And you further say, and he began meeting with the ghostwriter while he was still vice president. There's the motive. Mr. Hur, how much did President Biden get paid for his book?
Off the top of my head, I'm not sure if that information appears in the report.
Sure does. There's a dollar amount in there. You remember?
I don't. It may be $8 million. If that's
$8 million. Joe Biden had 8 million reasons to break the rules. Took classified information and shared it with the guy who was writing the book. That's why he did. He knew the rules, but he broke them for $8 million in a book advance.
What more do you need? What more do you need? He was vice president of the United States. The Democrats today spent the entire time trying to make this about Donald Trump, who was in a very different circumstance, given that he was president of the United States. A very different situation applies to him. There is no suggestion Donald Trump tried to write a book. Donald Trump did not try to profit off of any documents. There's nothing like that. Joe Biden tried to make $8 million. He did make $8 million off of stealing classified documents and using them for his own financial enrichment, which tracks with Joe Biden's entire career in politics. His family has gotten richer and richer as Americans have gotten poorer and poorer, and he's gotten richer on your back. So here he is doing it yet again. And Hur, you can hear his reticence there for a moment. He must have forgotten that he had included that detail in the report. He said, I don't think that number appears in the report. In fact, Jim Jordan says, yes, it does. He gave him the page number, and he goes, okay, well, in that case, $8 million is what we're talking about. He had an $8 million bounty on classified information. He stole it. He stole it. And then he kept it where? Well, at the Penn Biden Center, and in his garage, and in his basement den, and in his main floor office, and in his third floor den, and at the University of Delaware, and at the Biden Institute, and probably the underwear drawer. He kept them all over the place. Once he got the $8 million, he was like, who cares? I'll just keep them everywhere. Now, here's the other piece. Some of this, much of this you'll know already, having heard or read this report to begin with. But remember, Joe Biden's ghostwriter attempted to delete the evidence of this conversation, his recorded conversation with Joe where he discloses he has classified information. Hur goes over this today.
What did that ghostwriter do with the information Joe Biden shared with him on his laptop? What did he do after you were named special counsel?
Chairman, if you're referring to the audio recordings that Mr. Zwanitzer created of his conversations with
exactly
Mr. Biden,
what I'm referring to.
He slid, if I remember correctly, he slid those files into his recycle bin on his computer.
Tried to destroy the evidence, didn't he?
Correct.
He's what a weird description. I guess it's a literal description. He slid the files into the recycle bin on his computer. First of all, don't trust that guy with cybersecurity. He doesn't realize you're supposed to empty the recycle bin. But he puts it into the recycle bin, and he's like, it's gone. Thank goodness. It's gone. It wasn't gone. The FBI found it. And the Justice Department spotted it. They're like, hey, wait a second. What were you doing with this? He was trying to delete it to do Joe Biden a favor. $8 million. And yet not enough. Not enough for Robert Hur to say he's guilty of a crime. In fact, Hur has said, well, it was his memory. His memory was shot. We asked him all sorts of questions, and he failed the test. And he even brought up stuff on his own, and he failed the test. In fact, on that front, the transcript makes it clear once and for all that Joe Biden didn't know what years he was vice president of the United States. He didn't know what year his son had died. He also didn't know what years his son was deployed, actually. I don't remember that from the original headlines. That's also here. Let me read to you from the transcript now. Some reporting here. The Daily Caller summarizing it. Hur's report detailing the president's handling of classified documents made several notes about Biden's memory, including they forgot the date of his son's death and when his vice presidency began and ended. Biden held an unexpected press conference a few hours after the release of the report, criticizing Hur for questioning his late son's death. The president, however, was the one who raised the date of his son's death, according to the transcript. Rather than pushing Biden about the date of Beau Biden's death, Hur questioned the president on where work-related papers were being kept following the conclusion of his vice presidency in January of 2017. Biden began, well, I don't know. This is, what, 2017, 2018, that area? Yes, sir, Hur responded. Remember, this is the conclusion of his vice presidency. It would be crystal clear it was 2017. Biden's wondering, was it 2017, 2018? Hur says, yes, sir. Biden responds, remember, in this time frame, my son has either been deployed or is dying. And so it was, and by the way, there were still a lot of people at the time when I got out of the Senate that were encouraging me to run in this period, except the president, he says. Let me point out a couple things here. We'll get to it in a moment, but get to it all in a moment. But he's reflecting on the period of 2017 specifically. He says his son at that moment was either deployed or dying in 2017. To be crystal clear, his son died in 2015, 2 years prior to that date. So here he is thinking about, he's like, my son was either deployed or dying in 2017. Neither is true. And then he says that people at the time were pressuring him as he, quote, got out of the Senate. They were encouraging me to run in this period. He meant for president. He didn't get out of the Senate in 2017. He left as vice president of the United States. He goes on, he says Obama wasn't telling him to run for president. In fact, he was saying the opposite. He said, except the president. I'm not, and not a mean thing to say. He just thought that she had a better shot of winning the presidency than I did, Biden began, talking about Hillary. And so I hadn't at this point, even though I'm at Penn, I hadn't walked away from the idea that I may run for office again. But if I ran again, I'd be running for president. And so what was happening, though? What month did Beau die? Oh, God. May 30, 2015. Rachel Cotton, a White House lawyer, interjected. So Biden has no idea. And he can't recount these dates as he's talking to Robert Hur. Hur was accurate. Biden lied about this. Biden lied about this to the public, as usual. Meanwhile, today, a CBS White House correspondent by the name of Weijia Zhang tweeted the following. She stuck up for the Biden lie today. She said, the president was fired up about Hur's claim that he couldn't remember when his son Beau died because it was false, she says. He immediately said the date, according to the interview transcript. Now, I just read the transcript to you. Does that square with the actual transcript? Not a chance. This is a lie from a CBS White House correspondent, and CBS should put her on ice or fire her for that. She's lying about something we can easily see with our own eyes. That's insane. Even NBC's Ken Delanian, who routinely carries water for the deep state, came out today. He couldn't stomach Weijia Zhang's spin. He quote tweeted her and said, Biden talking about 2017. Quote, remember in this time frame, my son is either been deployed or is dying. End quote. Beau Biden died in 2015. Said the NBC guy to knock down the CBS reporter's garbage. That's insane. That's insane. But the Democrats, they were something else today. I mean, they're exactly what you'd expect. Cosmo Kramer himself, Jamie Raskin, was saying this isn't a memory test for Biden. This is a memory test for America.
It's not. This, my friends, this is a memory test. But it's not a memory test for President Biden. It's a memory test for all of America. Do we remember fascism? Do we remember Nazism?
Oh, my God.
Remember communism and totalitarianism?
Oh, my God.
Have we completely forgotten the sacrifices of our parents and grandparents?
All right, just stop. The guy's like freaking ridiculous. And nowhere near the reality that's found in this report. Democrat Congressman Steve Cohen was really upset that Some Republicans used the word senile to describe Joe Biden accurately today. Really upset about it. He said it's not senility, it's memory disability.
Joe Biden does, and understanding Social Security and Medicaid are important institutions that help seniors, not senile people. I mean, I really object to that comment. People see nobody suggests he's senile, and that's disrespectful of senior people with any kind of memory disability. Lots of seniors have memory disability, but they're not senile, and to do such was shameful. Joe Biden is a competent, good president who knows American values.
Gentleman's time has expired.
He didn't even believe himself. He couldn't stick the landing on his words. He was like, he didn't know what else to say. He's a competent, good president, and I'd better stop there. He's not senile. He has a memory disability. Chris is calling in from Marshall now, line 3. Chris, good afternoon. You're on the Vince Coglianese Show.
Vince, good afternoon. Of course, I'm calling from the front line of the heartland, Marshall, Virginia.
Amen.
I'm just wondering if any of those agents, well, first thing, I'm wondering if Tim Jordan mentioned that all of those documents were found in all of those places after they were giving advance warning of them being searched. But my main point is, I wonder if any agent pulled the short straw and had to go rustling through Dr. Not a Dr. Joe's panty drawer, because if I had any classified documents to stash, that's where I'd stick them. There's probably a treasure trove of information mussing away in there to this very day.
Well, that's a very legitimate question, Chris, because remember they did that to Melania, didn't they? They raided.
Imagine that. See,
They
I bet that agent drew the long straw.
The long straw. You're a bunch of weirdos if that's what you're after. But that's a good point, though, Chris. It is a good comparison. For sure. And by the way, and in case you needed more visual imagery to accompany your phone call, Joe Biden did say during his conversation with Robert Hur, quote, "I just hope you didn't find any risque pictures of my wife in a bathing suit," which you probably did. "She's beautiful," said Joe Biden, to which America all retched at the same time. Don't say that. Please don't say that. It's something else. Thank you, Chris. Always from the front line of the heartland. Appreciate that. Hey, coming up, we've got Mike Davis from the Article 3 Project. He'll break down what he heard today. Robert Hur said, yeah, this guy, he met every element of the crime. Not sure what his motive was, though, other than the $8 million for his book deal. What a corrupt world we live in. Mike Davis will break it down next. Hey, good afternoon to you. It's 3:35 now. News Talk 105.9 WMAL, where we're making sense of the news. Coming up, Congressman Ben Cline joins us at 4:30. At 5 o'clock from the Federalist, Breonna Lyman is here. And then Jake Denton talks tech with us, and TikTok specifically from the Heritage Foundation. That's 5:30. You can join us 888-630-9625. 888-630-WMAL. Joe Biden lied to the American people. That's the position that Robert Hur laid out today in questioning from Matt Gaetz.
February 8th, the White House question, Mr. President, why did you share classified information with your ghostwriter? The President, I did not share classified information. I did not share it. I guarantee I did not. That's not true, is it, Mr. Hur?
That is inconsistent with the findings based on the evidence in my report.
Yes, it's a lie. It's just what regular people would say, right? Yeah, all right.
Robert Hur snickers. He goes, yes, that's what regular people would say. It's a lie. It's a lie. Joining us now is Mike Davis, founder and president of the Article 3 Project, who's been watching all of this closely. Mike, good to have you back, sir.
Thank you for having me.
Robert Hur, he laid out a very damning series of facts about Joe Biden, and yet no charges for the president. What did you think of that?
Well, it's not surprising to me because Robert Hur is part of the James Comey, Chris Wray, Rod Rosenstein, fake Republican D.C. cabal. When I was counsel I held up Robert's nomination to be U.S. Attorney in Maryland for several months because I knew he's part of the law, and he really delivered today for Joe Biden. They have clear evidence that Joe Biden violated the Espionage Act by taking these classified records, 5 stashes of stolen classified records, from his time as vice president and even as a senator, which you have no way of explaining other than he knew what he was doing. And then he shared these records with his ghostwriter. He lied about it, and then his ghostwriter deleted the recordings where Joe Biden is committing espionage by sharing these classified records with his ghostwriter.
And he did it to enrich himself. That ghostwriter was writing a book in which he was getting an $8 million advance. It seems like open and shut to me.
Yeah, and that's just part of it. Remember, Miranda Devine at the New York Post reported that it looks pretty clear that Hunter Biden also used classified materials in a 23-point memo that Hunter Biden drafted when apparently Hunter Biden had the prostitutes go home and put away the crack pipe and became a geopolitical expert in Ukraine to secure millions of dollars in Burisma funding for the Bidens. So this is part of a pattern by Biden where he is using stolen classified records to enrich himself and his family. That is clearly espionage, and it is inexcusable that Robert Hur is declined to recommend charges here. Remember, this goes to Merrick Garland. Biden's Attorney General Merrick Garland is the one who made the decision to prosecute Trump for presidential records Trump is allowed to have in the office of former president under the Presidential Records Act, while declining to prosecute his boss, Biden, for the stolen classified records that Biden used to enrich himself and his family.
Let's address the facts on this because I think it's important for the audience. You've got today the Democrats kept raising the Trump case, the Jack Smith, Merrick Garland classified documents case against Donald Trump. And they say, well, the difference here, Robert Hur even emphasized, the difference here is that Trump was kind of a pain. When he was asked for it, he made it difficult to give these documents back, whereas Joe Biden didn't. So therefore, those are the differences. To that, you say?
Well, President Trump should have been a pain because he has the absolute statutory right under the Presidential Records Act to have his presidential records. Remember, under the Presidential Records Act, the president decides whether they are presidential records that belong to the government that he can access anytime he wants, or they're personal records that belong to him, i.e. the Clinton Socktor case, where Clinton had 79 audio recordings, 8 years of highly classified recordings of his presidency that the Obama judge correctly said were personal records because President Clinton took them when he left office, right? But what they're doing to President Trump here is they are trying to prosecute him for records he's allowed to have, and they're trying to say he was a jerk about it, so they're trying to charge him with obstruction. What about Biden's ghostwriter deleting the evidence of Joe Biden's espionage where he's sharing classified records illegally with his ghostwriter? What about when the Biden Justice Department had a sweetheart deal with Biden's personal attorneys where they did secret searches for several months for these stolen classified records after they're prosecuting President Trump? President Biden's personal attorneys represented they turned over all the records after they turned over 4 statues, and then Biden and the Justice Department, that time they appointed Robert Hur, who sent the FBI into Biden's homes and offices, and they found another stash of stolen classified records. How is that not obstruction?
Yeah, exactly. Well, as you talk about, Robert Hur did everything he could to whitewash all of this for Biden, so Biden gets away with it, as opposed to the way they're treating Donald Trump now. But that didn't stop the left from complaining about the Hur report today. Here's Adam Schiff complaining that, the things you said in the report are being used by our political opponents.
What you did write was deeply prejudicial to the interests of the president. You say it wasn't political, and yet you must have understood. You must have understood the impact of your words. You must have understood the impact of your decision to go beyond the specifics of a particular document, to go to the very general, to your own personal, prejudicial, subjective opinion of the president, one you knew would be amplified by his political opponent, one you knew that would influence a political campaign. You had to understand that. And you did it anyway. And you did it anyway. And let me just go to some of the differences here between the president's conduct and Mr. Trump's. In the superseding indictment, on page 3, it says that Mr. Trump suggested that his attorney falsely represent to the FBI and grand jury that he did not have documents called for by the grand jury subpoena. You didn't find anything like that with respect to Mr. Biden, did you?
Congressman, I do not have the Trump indictment in front of me, but I need to address something that you said in your prior question. What you were suggesting is that I needed to provide a different version of my report that would be fit for public release.
Yeah, so he gets into further debate on this. But here you have all these Democrats that are complaining that Robert Hur said that Joe Biden had memory lapses, Mike.
So this is amazing to me. There is clear evidence that Joe Biden committed espionage by willfully retaining these classified documents and willfully sharing these documents with his ghostwriter. They have him on tape saying this. His ghostwriter destroys the tape. That is a clear Espionage Act violation. It's clear obstruction of justice. Biden should have been charged. The only reason he's not charged is because Robert Hur went out of his way to protect Biden by saying, I don't want to charge him because he's a lovable, demented man, essentially, and it would be difficult to prove that he willfully did what he did. That's just complete nonsense. Robert Hur is protecting Biden, and the Democrats should be very happy with Robert Hur that he said what everyone already knows, that President Biden is demented and didn't recommend espionage charges they did with Trump.
There was a big piece in the Washington Post this morning on this same issue, which is that the White House is angry at Merrick Garland for not being political enough, and not literally just removing any reference to Biden's senility from the report, and just saying he's exonerated, he didn't do anything wrong, and on we go. Do you get the sense that this is just meant to give us the appearance that they're being tough on Biden?
They look, remember, it was Joe Biden who went to the Washington Post and complained that his Justice Department and other Democrat prosecutors weren't prosecuting Trump.
Yes.
And then, what do you know? Jay Bratt does this raid on Trump for presidential records he's allowed to have under the Presidential Records Act. And Matthew Colangelo gets sent from the number 3 office in the Biden Justice Department to resurrect the zombie case against Trump in New York that's going to trial in 2 weeks. This is all lawfare driven by Biden, and I cannot believe that they're upset with Robert Hur for protecting Biden.
Yeah, it's amazing. All right, Mike Davis, thank you very much from the Article 3 Project. I really appreciate your insight into all of this, as always. Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
That's Mike Davis. And this, it is interesting, you know, the way I interpret these leaks to places like the Washington Post and the New York Times. Oh, the White House is angry at Merrick Garland. Usually what I suspect about that is that's their way of exerting public pressure on Merrick Garland to take out their political enemies. They don't want stuff that can be FOIA'd. They don't want, those emails, directly to the Justice Department. Like, hey, go after Trump. So what they do is they go into these newspapers and they have these White House officials says, Biden furious at Merrick Garland for not doing this soon enough. And what does Merrick Garland say when he cracks open the paper in the morning? He's like, well, there's the smoke signal. Now, better go after that guy. It's amazing. More on Adam Schiff here. This is Adam Schiff freaking out on Robert Hur today.
You don't gratuitously do things to prejudice the subject of an investigation when you're declining to prosecute. You don't gratuitously add language that you know will be useful in a political campaign. You were not born yesterday. You understood exactly what you were doing. It was a choice. You certainly didn't have to include that language. You could have said, vis-a-vis the documents that were found at the university, the president did not recall. There is nothing more common. You know this. I know this. There is nothing more common with a witness of any age when asked about events that are years old to say, I do not recall. Indeed, they're instructed by their attorney to do that if they have any question about it. You understood that. You made a choice. That was a political choice. It was the wrong choice.
Yeah, I mean, also Schiff is lying here about the transcript. Schiff had time by the time he said all of this to have read the transcript, and he's refusing to acknowledge it. In that transcript, Biden is floating on his own the year 2017 as being a time in which his son was still alive and possibly deployed. He had been dead for years by that point. So it's worth noting if you're going to use Biden's failing memory as an excuse for not charging him. Let's see here. We got a couple great calls coming in, as always. I've got Nick in Purcellville, line 2. Nick, good afternoon. You're on the Vince Coglianese Show.
Hey, Vince. I don't know if anybody's brought this up, but when Biden did these acts, it was like in 2017, and when he was senator, they're placing his current mental condition in when these were done. You know, like they're putting him as being not deranged, but having a mental problem back when he took these documents. And you don't have to testify in court if you're charged with something. Am I right or wrong with that? So
you're totally right.
He doesn't have to go into court and say anything. So, you know, because he can't be his memory can't be verified in court. That doesn't matter, because your lawyer could do all the talking for you.
Of course. And so, and you have a Fifth Amendment right. I mean, you don't have to go in there and get yourself in trouble. You don't have to say a word. And the reality here is the Hur has come up with this contorted reasoning that, well, if Biden was in court and he did testify, then the jury would say, well, he was what was the phrase? A sympathetic elderly man with a poor memory. Well, again, to your point, Nick, he doesn't even have to testify. He could just let his lawyers do the work. But it doesn't matter. This is just, as Mike Davis points out, this is a whitewash. You know, this is Biden. Biden steals these documents to enrich himself and his family to the tune of at least $8 million for the book and a lot more for Hunter Biden. And you've got the Justice Department under Joe Biden washing their hands of this whole thing.
And Vince, isn't it like the only way that they could get him out of this was to say that, you know, we can't take him to court because of his mental capacity.
Right. That was the rationale. So if you remove that detail from the report, then it becomes even more obvious that he should be charged.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
All right. Thank you.
Thanks, Nick. Yeah, that's the big thing today. And Hur was trying to explain that over and over to the extent that we can trust him on any of this to the Democrats today. Let me see. Dave in Fredericksburg, line 3. Dave, good afternoon. You're on the Vince Coglianese Show.
Hey, Vince, I just got a couple things. The only thing I want to say about Trump was they kept harping on Trump being abusive and not adhering to the officials on the documents that he had. But they never mentioned the fact that Trump said he had a right to those documents, being a former president. But they always try to make it like he was obstructing, but not so much the fact that he had a right to those documents. And he had already talked to archives about what they needed to do, and they instructed him on how to secure the documents.
Right. Yeah, that's an important detail. I just want to remind people, Trump was, by the government's account, very cooperative on a number of elements here, including putting locks on doors at Mar-a-Lago to contain documents and working with them on getting documents back. There were some debates, apparently, about other documents. But again, it goes back to what Mike Davis was saying. There are massive differences here. The President of the United States has broad discretion about the classification, declassification, and official nature of documents within his control.
Yeah, they're not, to me, it seems, I know the Democrats, they like to talk fast, don't want you to answer, but they try to cut you off when they do it. I watched a couple hours of this morning, but they never clarified the fact about, they kept saying that Trump had boxes, hundreds of documents. Well, come to find out, he only really had 70 documents, according to what they figured were classified. And they try to make it look, they make the picture, and show the boxes and all.
Yes.
Like he had hundreds. That's just not, that is false.
They didn't do that to Biden. Did you notice?
Correct. They didn't do that. The one of the things I had about Biden was the previous guy said something about his dementia. And the thing was, I was saying, they didn't want to use that word in the broadcast today. It was a couple of Democrats came up and says, well, you shouldn't say dementia because you don't know that for a fact. They said he has a tendency to forget. So they didn't want to make it sound like...
Steve Cohen referred to it as memory disability. That's the euphemism he chose today.
Well, just like what's his name said, everybody forgets, but they didn't want to make it a physical condition because he's running for office again. See?
Yeah.
They didn't want to make that sound like dementia.
Yeah.
In our country.
That's a good point. Yeah, Steve Cohen says his own party's nominee has a memory disability. That's quite a ringing endorsement from a Democrat today. No, it's very interesting points, Dave. Thank you very much. I appreciate that. More of your calls in just a moment. Back to the phones we go. Larry's calling in from Potomac now. That's on line 2. Hello, Larry. Good afternoon. You're on the Vince Coglianese Show.
Hello, Vince. How are you today?
Good, sir.
Listen, apropos to your last guest's comment that Hur is part of the Comey Ray, Rod Rosenstein cabal, he goes through in his investigation and comes up with all these reasons why Biden's guilty, but essentially says we can't prosecute him because he's a sympathetic old man. And that's exactly the same formula that Comey used when he went through all of the reasons why they should prosecute Hillary Clinton, but no reasonable prosecutor would do it. I mean, this is the same game plan from one to the other.
Yeah, remember Comey's explanation of Hillary's theft of tens of thousands of emails kept in her bathroom. He said she was extremely careless. He decided not to say grossly negligent for legal reasons. Whitewashing the whole thing. Hillary's mad at him anyway. She blames him for losing the election. I guess we're seeing something similar play out right now. All right, hold tight. Coming up in the next hour, we've got Ben Klein, a congressman from Virginia. He was a part of Robert Hur's testimony today. We'll get to that.